In 1961, my mother fed 7 people on 11 cents, and I did not know we were poor until a boy at school told me.
I want to say the part nobody says about this before I say anything else. Most of what you're going to see on this list was not charming. It was not rustic. It was what was left. Some of it was very good. 4 or 5 things my mother made are better than anything I have eaten since, and I mean that. But 3 of these I would not put in front of a dog now, and one of them put my cousin Ray in a bed for 9 days, and I am going to tell you which one and exactly what she did wrong. Number 4 is the one she made on Sunday mornings, and it cost about 11 cents, and there are grown men in this county who will get quiet if you mention it. My name is Burl, 72 years in these mountains. I want to tell you what money looked like here, because the prices will not mean anything to you otherwise. My father worked a mine. In 1958, he brought home about $52 a month, and out of that came the truck and the doctor and whatever the garden did not grow. My mother fed 6 children and 2 adults on what was left, which was not much, and she did it 3 times a day, every day for about 26 years, and she did not miss. I want to be careful here because the internet has made this into a pretty thing, and it was not a pretty thing. There is a difference between eating cheap and eating poor. Eating cheap is a choice you make on Tuesday. Eating poor is when the choice was made for you in February and you are still living inside it in April. Almost everything here is the second kind. And the other thing, my mother ate last.
Every single day of my childhood, my mother ate last, and there were nights she said she was not hungry, and she was hungry.
I did not understand that until I was about 30 years old, and it hit me in a grocery store parking lot, and I sat there in the truck for a while. So that is the frame. 25 of them counted down with what they cost and what they were actually like. Before we start, subscribe, because this is going somewhere, and number 1 is not a recipe. Let us go. Number 25, poke salad. This is the one that put Ray in bed, so we will start here. Pokeweed comes up along the fence rows in the spring. Big green leaves, taller than a child by June, and it is free. And in April, free food was worth a great deal in this hollow. My grandmother cooked it every year, and so did everybody else on this creek. Pokeweed is poisonous. The root is very poisonous. The stalk turns poisonous as it grows and reddens, and even the young leaves have enough in them to make a grown man sick. The way it was done was you picked only the young leaves, only in early spring, only while the stalk was still green, and never 1 inch of the root. Then you boiled them and poured the water off.
Boiled them again and poured that off. Boiled them a 3rd time. 3 waters, and each one carried some of it away.
Then you fried what was left in bacon grease with a little vinegar and sometimes a scrambled egg through it. Ray's mother did 2 waters. That is the whole story. 2 waters instead of 3. One time, in the spring when everybody was tired and there were 4 children under 6 in that house. He was 9 years old. He was sick for 9 days, and there was a night they did not know, and the doctor was in town, and town was a long way in 1948. He was fine after. He lived to be 81 and told that story himself at every reunion, and he would hold up 3 fingers. I am not telling you to make this. I am telling you that free food had a price, and everybody here knew exactly what it was. Number 24, souse meat. Some people call it head cheese. When you kill a hog in November, the good cuts are spoken for before the animal is even down.
The hams get cured. The middlings get salted. The shoulders go to the smokehouse. The fat goes in the kettle for lard.
What is left is the head and the feet and the ears, and in a house that has just spent all year feeding that animal, you are not throwing away a head. So you boil it, all of it for most of a day, until the meat falls off the bone. Then you pick that meat off by hand while it is still hot enough to hurt, and you chop it fine, and you season it harder than you would season anything else, because it needs it. Sage, black pepper, a lot of vinegar, sometimes red pepper. Then it goes back into its own broth in a pan and out to the spring house, and the gelatin that came out of the bones sets the whole thing into a loaf you can slice. That is 4 or 5 meals for 8 people out of a part of the animal that a store today grinds up or throws out. I will be honest with you. I do not like it. I never liked it. My father loved it and would eat it cold on light bread standing at the counter, and I ate it because you ate what was in front of you, and that was the end of that discussion in our house. Number 23, cornmeal mush, 3 times a day. Cornmeal, water, salt. Stir it over the fire until it thickens. Spoon it into a bowl. Pour milk over it.
That is the whole thing, and I need you to sit with what it means when I say 3 times a day.
My mother told me about the winters before I was born, when it was mush in the morning and mush at noon and mush at night, and the only thing that changed across the whole day was whether there was milk to put on it. When there was no milk, you ate it with salt, and you did not say anything about it. Cost. Near enough to nothing. 20 pounds of meal was under $1 at the store, and most people did not buy it at the store, because you grew the corn and carried it to the mill, and the miller kept a portion instead of charging you. Here is the thing about mush. It fills you. It does not feed you. Those are 2 different things, and every woman in this hollow knew the difference and had to set it on the table anyway and watch her children eat it. Number 22, the onion sandwich. 2 pieces of light bread, a little lard or mayonnaise if there happened to be a jar, a thick slice of raw sweet onion, salt, black pepper. That is what you ate when the garden was finished and the meat was gone and payday was Friday and it was Tuesday afternoon. The onion is the only thing in it with any flavor, and that is on purpose because it is doing the work of everything that is missing. I will tell you something that will sound strange.
I know men my age who will still make one on purpose, not for the memory, but because they want it. I am one of them.
My wife has watched me do it for 40 years and has never once understood it. Number 21, water pie. You want to know how far it went? This is how far it went. Water, sugar, flour, a spoon of vanilla if there was vanilla in the house, a few dots of butter, all of it poured into a pie crust and baked. There is no fruit in it. There was no fruit. There is no milk in it because the milk was needed. It goes into the oven looking like a mistake, like a pan of dishwater, and it comes out set into something close to a custard, and it is sweet and it is warm. If you are 11 years old and there has been nothing sweet in that house since Christmas, it is the best thing that has ever happened to you, and you will remember it at 70. Cost about 4 cents. This is a dessert invented by women who had nothing whatsoever to make a dessert out of, and who made one anyway, and I think about that more than I think about most things. Number 20, groundhog. Yes, people ate them. People here ate them regularly, and a few still do, and they will tell you so at the feed store without lowering their voice. Here is the part that matters, because this is where people ruin it. You have to get the glands out. There are 7 or 9 of them depending on who you ask, small and waxy, up under the front legs and along the lower back. If you leave one single gland in, the entire animal tastes the way a wet dog smells, and you have wasted the meat and the morning and the shell. Then you parboil it, because the meat is tough and strong, and pour that water off. Then you bake it slow with sweet potatoes and onion. It is dark, greasy, heavy meat with a taste that stays in your mouth. I am not going to tell you it is good.
It is not good. It is meat, and it was free, and it was eaten in the garden anyway, and in 1935 that settled the argument.
Number 19, egg gravy. 1 egg beaten into hot grease and flour and milk and cooked until it thickens. This is what you did when you had exactly 1 egg and 5 people at the table. You cannot divide 1 egg 5 ways on a plate. Everybody can see it, and everybody counts, and the child knows immediately who got the bigger half. You can divide 1 egg 5 ways inside a gravy, poured over hot biscuits, and it disappears into the pan and comes back out as enough, and nobody at that table is counting anything. That is the whole trick. It is a good one. And it is the kind of arithmetic my mother did in her head at 5:30 in the morning, every morning, without ever once saying out loud what she was doing. Number 18. Dandelion greens and everything else in the yard.
The whole yard was a grocery store in April, and everybody knew it.
Yeah.
Dandelion, creasy greens, lamb's quarter, chickweed, wild mustard, poke if you were careful.
Pick the dandelion before it flowers, or it turns bitter enough to be genuinely unpleasant, and boil it once and pour that off, then fry it down in bacon grease with a little vinegar. Free. And here is the part that is actually true and not nostalgia. Those greens come up at the exact time of year when the root cellar is empty. Nothing green had crossed that table since October. Whatever your body had run out of by April, that was what was coming up out of the yard on its own. Nobody here knew the word for any of it. They could not have told you a single thing about vitamins. They just knew that you ate greens for a week in April and something lifted, and that their mothers had done it, and so they did it. Number 17. Killed lettuce. Leaf lettuce out of the garden, torn up in a bowl with green onions. You heat bacon grease in a skillet until it is very hot, hot enough that it moves in the pan. Then you pour it straight over the lettuce.
It wilts down under the heat and goes dark and glossy. A splash of vinegar into the hot skillet, then that over the top.
Salt. They call it killed lettuce because the grease kills the lettuce. It goes limp and dark and glossy, and it honestly looks like something has gone wrong. It is one of the best things I have ever put in my mouth in 72 years. And it exists for about 3 weeks in May, while the leaf lettuce is young, and then the lettuce bolts in the heat and turns bitter, and it is over for the year. You cannot have it in July. You could not have it in July in 1955, and you cannot have it in July now, and there's something about that I have come to like. Number 16. Fried mush. Same mush as number 23. Same cornmeal, same water, same nothing. But here's what you do. You pour what is left over into a loaf pan at night and set it somewhere cold. By morning, it is firmed into a solid block. You turn it out and slice it a 1/2 inch thick, and you fry those slices in grease until they are brown and crisp on the outside and still soft in the middle, and you pour sorghum over them. Same ingredients. Nothing added but a pan and a night, and one more decision.
And it goes from the food of a hard march, the food a child dreads, to something that same child will get out of bed for.
That is not a recipe. That is a woman refusing to serve the same defeat twice and doing it with nothing. Number 15. Crackling bread. When you render the hog fat down into lard, what is left in the bottom of that kettle are the cracklings, the crisp brown bits of skin and meat that will not melt. They are already paid for. They cost you nothing. They were going to the dogs. You stir a handful of them into the cornbread batter. Now here's a number, because this is the whole reason it existed. A piece of plain cornbread will not hold a man who is cutting timber. He is hungry again by 10. A piece of crackling bread with that fat and protein worked through it will hold him until dinner. Same corn, same skillet, same oven, same wood. The difference between a man working all morning and a man losing an hour is a handful of something that was headed out the back door. Number 14. Tomato.
Bacon grease and flour cooked together, then home canned tomatoes poured in and cooked down until it thickens. Black pepper over biscuits.
In August, it is fresh tomatoes off the vine, and it is very good. In January, it is a quart jar off a shelf in the cellar, and it is still very good. And here is what I want you to notice. That jar cost you nothing in January. It cost you a day in August. In a kitchen with a wood stove going and a canner rocking and the windows running with water and the temperature in that room over 100 degrees. Everything on this list that was cheap in winter was expensive in summer. That is the trade, and every one of those women made it on purpose. Number 13. Cornbread crumbled in buttermilk. You crumble cold cornbread into a tall glass of buttermilk until the glass is full and you eat it with a spoon. That is it. There is nothing else to it. This is what men in this county ate at 9 o'clock at night after coming off a shift, standing up, still in their boots, not sitting down because if they sat down they were done for the day. My father did it more times than I could count, and I can still hear the spoon on the glass. 2 cents, if that. And it is the single most Appalachian thing on this entire list. And if you are from here, your chest just went tight. And if you are not from here, it sounds like nothing. Number 12. Fried potatoes and onions. Potatoes sliced thin, onion, hot grease, salt, plenty of black pepper. And here is the part that everybody gets wrong today. So listen to this one. You leave it alone. You do not stir it. You put it in the hot skillet, and you spread it out, and you walk away from it, and you let that bottom layer go all the way past brown to almost dark, and then you turn the whole thing over one time.
People stir it because they are afraid of burning it, and what they get is pale, limp, wet potatoes with no crust anywhere in the pan.
The crust is the entire point. The crust is the food. Everything else is just potato. Potatoes were the crop here. Everybody grew them and everybody cellared them. And 100 pounds in the cellar in October meant you were going to be all right. Number 11. Leather breeches. Green beans, whole, run onto a heavy thread with a needle and hung up behind the cook stove or in the attic to dry until they are shriveled and dark and leathery. They keep all winter hanging on a string. No jar, no lid, no canner, no pressure gauge, no electricity, no cellar, nothing.
In February, you take a string down, soak 'em overnight, and cook 'em slow most of a day with a piece of fat back.
They do not taste like fresh green beans, not at all, and anybody who tells you different has not had them. They taste smoky and deep and a little like ham, and people who grew up on leather breeches chase that taste for the rest of their lives and mostly do not find it. Zero cost to preserve. That is exactly why it existed. Jars cost money, lids cost money every single year, and a pressure canner costs more than most families on this creek had in the house at one time. Number 10. Pickled corn and kraut in the crock. Same idea as the breeches. A 5-gallon crock, salt, and thyme. Cut the corn off the cob or shred the cabbage fine. Pack it down into the crock with salt in layers. Weight it with a plate and a clean creek rock. Cover it with a cloth. And then leave it alone in the cool for weeks. It sours. It keeps. It does not need one thing from anybody after that. No lid and no fire and no money. Every spring house in this hollow had 2 or 3 crocks going at once. That was the entire winter vegetable supply for a family of 8, and the entire cash cost of it was the salt. Number 9. Chow chow. At the end of the season, the garden hands you a mess of things that are not enough of anything. 9 green tomatoes that will never ripen, half a cabbage, 3 peppers, a few onions, and the last of the beans.
You chop every bit of it together and pack it in vinegar with salt and a little sugar and whatever spice is in the cabinet.
Now, chow chow is not really a food. Nobody sits down to a bowl of chow chow. It is what you put on top of soup beans to make tonight taste different from last night. And when you are eating beans 4 nights out of 7, from October to April, that is not a small job. That is the difference between a family that is fed and a family that is tired of being fed. Number 8. Squirrel and dumplings. 2 squirrels make a pot that feeds 5 people, and boys got them before school with a 22, which means the meat in that pot costs 1 cartridge. Parboil them until the meat pulls off the bone. Put the meat and the broth back in the pot and drop your dumplings in. Squirrel is better than most people expect. It is better than rabbit, and I will argue that with anybody. The trick that nobody tells you is that a young one will go tender and an old one will not, no matter how long you cook it or what you do to it. And you can tell which is which by the size of the teeth before you ever start. Number 7. Chicken and dumplings, the slick kind. Not the fluffy drop biscuit dumplings you see now. Around here, it was rolled dough, rolled thin and cut into strips with a knife, dropped into the boiling broth where it goes soft and slippery and thickens the whole pot. And it was one old hen that had quit laying.
Think about that decision for a second. That hen had a job, and she stopped doing it, and she was still eating feed every day.
Killing her was not cruelty, and it was not a celebration. It was arithmetic that had finally come out the other way. But this was Sunday food. This was the pot that meant the preacher was coming, or your daughter and her husband were driving up from Ohio. Nobody made chicken and dumplings on a Tuesday. Number 6. Sawmill gravy and biscuits. Grease, flour, milk, salt, and more black pepper than you think is right. Poured over biscuits made from flour, lard, and buttermilk, cut out with a jar lid. They called it sawmill gravy because it was what fed the men at the sawmill camps, and there was an old joke that the gritty bits in it were sawdust, and the joke was told by the men eating it. Here is the number that matters on this one. Flour, lard, milk, and grease. Under 6 cents, and it put 8 people at a table, and every one of those 8 could then work until noon without stopping. There's nothing else on this list that does that map. Nothing. That is why every single house in this hollow made it, and why every single house made it the same way. Number 5. Soup beans and cornbread. If this hollow has a national dish, it is this one, and I do not think that is arguable by anybody who grew up here. Dried pinto beans soaked overnight, cooked all day slow with a piece of fatback or ham hock, salt near the end. That is the entire recipe. Cornbread on the side in an iron skillet and a raw onion and chow if there is any. And the bean broth, which we call the soup, is not poured out. Do not pour it out.
It is the best part of the whole pot, and it is where everything went, and you crumble your cornbread down into it.
A pound of dried beans was pennies, and it fed a family with enough left for the next day, and there is more protein in that pot than in the meat that family could not afford. I have eaten this 1,000 times in my life. I am not being poetic, I mean a literal 1,000. And I ate it last week, and I will eat it again this week. Number 4. Chocolate gravy. Now this is the one. If you are from here, you knew it was coming 20 minutes ago. If you are not from here, you have never heard of it in your life, and I have watched people from other places react to the words.
Cocoa, sugar, flour, and milk cooked in a skillet until it thickens into a warm, loose chocolate gravy, and it is poured over hot buttermilk biscuits.
Not a dessert, not after supper, not at Christmas. Breakfast, on Sunday morning. It cost about 11 cents to make a skillet of it that fed all 7 of us, and the reason it cost 11 cents is that the cocoa was the only thing in that pan that had to be bought with money. I told you at the start that grown men in this county go quiet if you bring it up. They do, and I will tell you why, because it took me most of my life to understand it. Everything else on this list has a reason. It stretches, it keeps, it fills, it costs nothing, it gets a man to noon. Every single one of them is a solution to a problem. Chocolate gravy solves nothing. You do not need it. It does not keep you alive. It does not hold you until dinner. It does not use up something that would have spoiled. It exists for no reason at all, except that somebody loved you.
And my mother, who ate last every single day of her life, got up before everybody else on Sunday to make it.
Number 3. Fried apples. Apples sliced with the peel left on, cooked down slow in butter or grease with sugar and a little cinnamon until they fall apart into something halfway between a side dish and a dessert. Served with breakfast or beside pork or by themselves in a bowl. Every place here had an apple tree, or was 200 yards from somebody who did. And here's the part I like. You did not fry the good apples. The good ones, the sound ones with no bruise, those went to the cellar or got dried because those would keep until March. The ones you fried were the drops, the bruised ones off the ground that would rot inside the week and were worth nothing to anybody. The best thing on this entire list came out of the fruit that was not good enough to store. Number 2. Apple stacked cake. Thin layers of cake, more like a hard cookie than a cake, stacked up with dried apples cooked down into a dark spice filling spread between every single layer. 6 layers, sometimes 10, sometimes 12 if the family was well liked. And here's what it actually was, which almost nobody knows now. It was a wedding cake for people who could not buy a wedding cake. The families coming to the wedding each brought a layer with them, baked at their own house that morning. The bride's people supplied the dried apples and the filling. It got stacked up right there at the wedding, layer by layer as people came up the road. A tall cake meant a lot of families came. And it has to sit. You make it a day or two ahead and let it be, because the moisture out of the apples has to move into those hard, dry layers and soften them from the inside. Cut it the same day and it is dry and tough and you have wasted it.
A cake built out of what the neighbors carried up a dirt road. That only becomes what it is if you leave it alone and wait.
That is the whole hollow in one dish. Number 1, it was never the recipes. I have just given you 24 things, and I want to take all of them back for a minute. You can go make every single one of these tomorrow. The ingredients are in any store in America right now. Cornmeal, pinto beans, flour, lard, cocoa, buttermilk. All of it is still there, and all of it is still cheap. And if you follow the method, it will taste right, because I have not held anything back. And it will not be the same thing. And I want to tell you exactly why, because it is not sentiment and it is not a mystery. None of this food was cheap. It only looked cheap at the table. The beans were cheap because somebody hoed that row in July with the sun on the back of his neck. The apples were free because a man planted that tree 40 years before you were born, and you never met him, and he knew you would not. The leather breeches cost nothing because a woman sat on a porch with a needle and a spool of thread for 3 hours, and her hands hurt afterward. The hog head was free because 11 people showed up in November and stood out in the cold all day cutting, and not one of them got paid, and every one of them went home with something.
The money price was low because the work was already done, and nobody counted the work, and nobody counted it because it was not work.
It was just what the day was. And then there is the last piece, and it is the real one, and I did not see it for a long time. Nobody ate alone. Every single meal on this list was cooked for a table with people around it. Chocolate gravy is not something you make for yourself on a Sunday. You do not build a 12-layer stack cake for one person. 2 squirrels and a pot of dumplings is not a portion. It is a room. That is the part that got expensive. And that is the part no store can sell back to you at any price. So if you take one thing off this list, do not take the recipe. Make the soup beans. They cost about $2 in 6 hours, and they are not hard, and you cannot ruin them, and the house will smell right by 3 in the afternoon. Then pick up the phone and tell somebody supper is at 6.